Hi, I'm Trevor. This is part two of a two-part video where I go in depth talking about my medical transition and how it relates to me transitioning specifically as a minor. I was 14 when I started testosterone, and I'm kind of just here to talk about that. This video will not focus on the medical process leading up to taking testosterone. That was explained in part one, which you can feel free to watch. I would greatly appreciate it if you did, but it shouldn't be necessary to understanding this one. This video just goes more in depth into my emotional experience, what transitioning young did for me, did to me, and kind of talking about how I grapple with all of that. And looking back on it now and reflecting, what do I feel? Like, just my honest thoughts and opinion. Part one of this video is more talking about what I actually had to do to get there, and explaining mostly the barriers in gender transition for somebody who's transitioning so young. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to check that out. I'll have it linked in the description of this video. It's also on my channel, of course. Just a few housekeeping things out of the way. I hope my video setup for this video is slightly better than the part one video. It was very low saturation. The video quality wasn't great. I was having some issues. I hope I've sorted that out for this one, but if not, I'm sorry. Please still bear with me. I'm figuring stuff out. Also, I have notes, which is why I'm looking down at my screen a lot and not so much at the camera. Otherwise, like, my thoughts would just go everywhere. I don't have like a solid script I'm working off of, but I have a lot of bullet points and I'm terrified of missing any. I already know I'm going to be missing out on a lot of content I could put into this video because there is so much about my transition that matters. There's so much life that I've lived through it, and there's just no possible way to describe it all and put it all into one video. So I'm gonna have to kind of suck it up and like be okay with this video not being perfect. More of a sit down, discuss things. I know I'm gonna miss out on things. I know I'm not gonna describe everything in perfect detail. I might be missing chunks of things here and there. This was 5+ years of my life, and trying to condense it into 2 videos has not been the easiest. Before I really get into this video, I want to start off by saying I am massively appreciative of everything, of all of the opportunities I've had, for the people who have been around me during it. I was incredibly lucky in a lot of circumstances with medical transition. I was already in as a patient, I got through things pretty quickly. I had 2 very supportive parents, which was crucial because they both needed to sign off on my treatment. If it weren't for my family, especially supporting me, I wouldn't be where I am today. And I am massively, massively appreciative of them. And of course, any friends along the way as well who were just really kind to me, really supportive, and were also invested in seeing me happy and transition. So thank you very much to everyone, even if they're not watching this video. I want to put it out there. I'm grateful for the experience that I've had. I'm grateful for the luck afforded to me, and I'm grateful for the great people I've been surrounded by. When I went on testosterone, I had trans friends at the time, many of which would not transition until much later, if at all. And I could see how envious they were of my transition because I was taking the steps super young. I mean, I was a 14-year-old. I was getting the testosterone and going to my medical appointments. I had supportive family. I mean, I had what a lot of these trans kids wanted. And it felt a little weird to have people be envious of me getting basic medical treatment. And as a 14-year-old, I think it was hard for me to deal with other people's envy of it. And it made me a little bit mad at times, even though I understood where they came from. But even if I might not have been as grateful back then, I certainly hope I'm more grateful now. I think I am. I feel like I am. So even though my trans friends at the time were envious, and it made me a little frustrated at points, or it was a little confusing, or I felt like they were mad at me, I know that's not true anymore. We've all had time to mature. I'm grateful for my experience. In some ways, I hope I could have been a role model to those younger trans friends of mine at the time. At least show them that it's possible, show them what life could look like. And even though they might have been envious or jealous to some extent, I don't blame them. And honestly, it has now just given me even more reason to be thankful for my position. Before I started testosterone and medical transition, I was having severe gender dysphoria, like most trans kids go through. I had so much dysphoria, like a lot of the nights I would come home from school or something, it would just be me crying and like letting out all of the anxious feelings and feeling depressed about it and stuff afterwards. I just realized you can see my dog's reflection in my snake tank. She's just on my bed chilling. So if you see movement, that's why. I started on a very, very low dose of testosterone, and the changes I went through didn't happen as fast as other trans people have gone through when they've started testosterone. Just for the fact that I was a child, and so they started me at a very, very low dose, and they went up in dose like extremely slowly. And so the changes in my voice and stuff weren't exactly on the same timeline that I was seeing other trans men experience changes. But that kind of goes for puberty in general for anyone. But since I started off from a low dose, like from the start, it wasn't like I was expecting anything like crazy fast. And I think my expectations were pretty good, actually. And I honestly, even if I did recognize some things might have been a little bit slower or taking a little bit longer, it didn't really distress me. It didn't upset me. I knew the changes were happening and they would continue to happen, just at kind of a more stable rate, honestly. Looking back on it now, if I had been put on a more standard dose of hormone replacement therapy to begin with, I think I would have literally like gone insane. I mean, at 14, I wasn't having the easiest time dealing with all of my emotions and stuff anyway. And so to go from one puberty into a second puberty that's also like really intense and really fast, I think that would have been not good. That takes me to my next point, though, because a lot of people think that I transitioned because I was 14 when I started testosterone. They thought I was transitioning like alongside a regular like cis male puberty, which isn't true. Most of the guys in my school at the time had already like long started or like almost nearly finished puberty. There were a couple of late blooming kids, obviously. I think there always are, especially because my high school was pretty big. So there were definitely kids around that were probably actually going through puberty around the same time as me, but few and far between, like really only a couple. Most of the guys had already started, and so I did feel a little bit behind. And not to mention, even if it was really close, I had already gone through first puberty, and so I had experienced a lot of changes first. And so even though it might have lined up pretty evenly with cis male puberty, there was still a sense that I was different. Like I had already gone through puberty. This wasn't a typical cis male puberty. In the exact same way. I wasn't really socially going through puberty with my classmates, if that makes sense. It was still very much a distinct and separate experience, and I had some like valuable experience over most of my cis male classmates anyway. I'd gone through my first puberty when I was quite young. I mean, I started going through puberty when I was like 9, and so there wasn't really even any common ground to go on. Even though I was on testosterone at the same time, some boys were starting to get their puberty for the first time or start hitting puberty for the first time. There was still this difference. And so even though like one of the common questions I get asked is, do you feel like your puberty kind of aligned with everyone else, or do you feel like you were going through the changes at an age appropriate time? And even though I'm thankful that the changes were happening when I was 14 and I was going through second puberty, at the time it really didn't feel like I was with it. Like I was just going through puberty like a guy. I was ecstatic to be on testosterone from the beginning. Even though the changes were coming in very slowly, I could see them. I was feeling the changes. And so to me, it really didn't matter the pace at which it was happening. It was happening, and I was satisfied with that. The first thing that I noticed, I feel like this is common for most trans men, was definitely my voice changing. Although I think there were changes starting before then, like a lot of them I feel like I can see as changes in hindsight. But at the time I was like, oh my God, I can really notice my voice changing. And so that was the thing that I was most tuned into. I started testosterone May of my freshman year of high school. And so by the end of freshman year, like none of the changes had even started yet. But by the time summer was over and I was going into my sophomore year, my voice had started to drop a little bit. And so I came back to school after summer break, and I was surprising some of my classmates. I actually felt so good in myself at the beginning of that year because, I mean, people were noticing the changes, especially when people don't see you for a few months in between and then they see the changes. They're like extra like mind blown. And to me, that was just really like some of the best gender affirmation for me. Aside from my voice, I mean, I really didn't start growing facial hair until like probably a year ago, honestly. So it took a long time. I wasn't noticing any facial hair growth or anything. I was getting way more leg hair, if anything. A lot of hair has blossomed all over my body at this point. Like I've got hairy arms. I'm starting to get hair on my hands and feet. Um, but once again, like all of these changes were minor, and even though they were minor to me, and I wasn't exactly picking apart every detail of the changes I was going through at the time, it just felt right. Like honestly, the most remarkable thing about my story is that it very quickly began to feel unremarkable. My transition happened so close to like a normal high school boy's puberty that it honestly felt like, especially the last like of my late teen years, I was just a guy. I had a normal guy dude history and everything. Like maybe not when I was 14, 15, but like 16, 17, 18, I feel like I was mostly caught up to where my classmates were, at least in like just socially. I was just trying to live like who I was, and I think I was pretty caught up by the end of high school. I was also able to change my name and gender marker before I got my driver's license, which I was extremely, extremely thankful for. It was just like one extra step that I didn't have to do. Thank God. But all of that made transitioning into the adult world as a trans person much easier. I had already like taken the steps to get my life in order and get my life started and transition and stuff. It felt like I didn't really have to do a lot of extra steps on my own as soon as I turned 18. I had my parents there helping me. I had started the medical process. My name was changed. My ID and everything, they were already correct and up to date before I turned 18. So essentially, to me, the biggest value in transitioning so young is that I already felt like my body was something I owned. It was becoming my body, and I think it's important that every adult feels that way, like they have ownership over themselves. And if I didn't transition so young, I feel like I would be a lot more lost and confused. I would have a lot more struggle, like keeping it together on the daily. But like I was able to form my identity like a child is supposed to. So they're ready to go into the world with that identity, with those strengths, with the whole person being formed. That's not to say that trans people who don't transition that young aren't fully formed. I just think it's more of a confusing period. There's definitely a lot of stress that goes with it, especially if you're not used to navigating any medical system. Suddenly becoming an adult and having to do that probably on your own because many people don't have supportive family members like I did. Um, that sounds much harder. I honestly started to think about my gender identity less and less. People would bring it up more often than I would think about it, especially in school because classmates always have questions. For some reason, everyone in high school already knows all of like your drama and gossip and shit, and so everyone knew I was trans. Different story. It was very stressful, but anyway. And it got to a point where like people were bringing it up more than it was in my own head, so much that I was like, oh my god, am I faking being trans? Because honestly, these people seem to be thinking about being trans more than I am. Like, does that mean I'm non-trans? It really got to the point where people started to ask about my gender identity and like they'd have questions for me or they'd bring up my gender identity a lot more than I was actually thinking about it. And this was a weird period for me because it also confused me. If other people were thinking about being trans more than I was, then maybe I'm not the trans one. And I say that with a laugh, but I actually mean that very seriously. When you have a lot of people in your ear, either indirectly or directly telling you that you will regret your decision or that you are going to detransition, like it's an inevitable thing for you, um, you start to worry. I got paranoid. Like I thought I would regret it. And that's not something like a simple regret. That would be a huge toll on my body from taking testosterone. Now, I know now in reality, it really wouldn't be the end of the world if I did ever have to detransition, which I don't feel the need to at all right now, but it's also not the end of the world. In reality, I didn't actually have regret. I had a lot of fear and anxiety that I would regret it, um, compounded by other people telling me I would. But I knew in myself that this was just feeling right. Like, the symptoms of my gender dysphoria were going away because the treatment for it was working. So everything was going as it should have been going, essentially. Today I can say my gender has blossomed into something I feel like trans man doesn't fully encapsulate. That's still the label I'm comfortable with, by the way. I'm not changing that anytime soon. I just feel like I had this idea of what a trans man is in my head when I first started to transition and come into my gender identity, and that isn't who I am anymore. I realized a while back that maybe I don't need top surgery. And I say maybe because I'm still leaving myself open to decisions and changing my mind and stuff. I'm only 20. But when I was like 14, I was dead set sure that I was going to be getting top surgery as soon as it was possible for me to. And when I brought it up with my gender doctor, she started like giving me resources and avenues to get the surgery. And it was my personal choice at age 16 to say, actually, I'm not even going to call these people because I can tell already my mind is not made up on the surgery. And even though at the time there was this nagging feeling of like, if I don't want top surgery, then I'm not a trans man. I was certainly not gonna let that stop me from taking the time I needed to decide about a surgery. And I'm more mature now. I know not every trans man needs testosterone. Not every trans man needs surgery. Like, those are all options for treatment of gender dysphoria, but they certainly aren't the only ones you can take. And honestly, part of the reason I don't feel the need to get top surgery so much anymore is that testosterone actually did wonders in shrinking my chest. I know it doesn't do that for everyone, but like, I can hide it so well under any shirt now that like, if I can hide it well enough, then like, I don't feel the need to necessarily have surgery for it. I don't mind like my partner seeing me naked with my chest, though that might be the case for some trans men. Really, in all, my gender identity has just become less strict on myself. I used to think I had to meet a lot of standards to be a guy. I used to think I had to meet a lot of standards to be a trans guy specifically. And that's just not true. Everyone has their own journey, different stories. It's as simple as that. Now, let's say if I didn't pursue the testosterone therapy, I might still like be dead set on getting top surgery. But for now, I'm just letting it stew in my brain. It's there as an option in the back of my mind. But I'm not ready to make any solid decision on that yet. And that's okay. Like, I'm only 20. If you are also like a 20-year-old, it doesn't matter really what age, but if you're also in your 20s or like you're a young adult and you're worried about getting everything on the to-do list for like transition, don't be. Give yourself time, give yourself space to breathe. I know there are trans people who are absolutely sure, and their opinion never changes, that they want this, and this. And that's cool too. Believe me, like, anything is fine. I mostly say this part for the people that are hesitant, but are afraid to be hesitant, because there are a lot of bigots saying that if you're hesitant, that's confirmation that you're not trans. And that's not true. You're allowed to be hesitant about making steps in your life without it meaning that you don't want to make those steps. I feel like now's a good time to talk about just shit I had to deal with for being like a trans kid, because part of most trans people's experience and like journey is a lot of unpleasant things, and dealing with other people being unpleasant towards you just because you're trans. The first very difficult thing I had to deal with is just classmates. And this one I feel like is honestly the least like heavy in my mind. Probably because I make a lot of excuses for kids. I mean, they're kids. I think they deserve a few excuses here and there. They're figuring themselves out. Most of my transition took place in high school, so I have a little bit less leniency towards like, I don't know, 16, 17-year-olds who are being like just absolutely garbage people, versus like a 12 or 13-year-old who's being a garbage person. Like, everyone hates middle schoolers. We get that. Now, I don't know exactly how it happened or like who was spreading what. It doesn't really matter. A lot of people knew me before I transitioned. I went to the same school district my whole life. And so a lot of my classmates had known me pre-transition. They knew that I was transitioning, and they knew that I had by the end of it. So I experienced a lot of classmates just whispering things about me, basically spilling the tea that I was trans to like anyone they knew. I'm pretty sure like if I was in a class with people, they knew I was trans just because it was like a hot topic or something. Especially me being trans, because I think I was like the only kid in the whole school that was taking a medical transition route at that young of an age. Even though there were other trans kids in the school, there was something unique about being able to talk about me. Like, I was some sort of oddity for not just being trans, but being so like die-hard trans that I took testosterone when I was 14. Of course, those comments could get really inappropriate, they could get really rude, and they could also put me in certain danger. There were a few times when rumors would spread to classmates who were not so nice. Now, most of the time, a lot of the gossip stayed between like just friend groups gossiping about me. But there were some instances where people found out and they weren't afraid to talk to my face about it. And those were just really anxiety provoking. Thankfully, the school I was in was very supportive of me. I had a really great group of like guidance counselors, and so they were able to help me through that. And so I don't feel like the bullying at school really affected me too much, at least right now in my life. And something that also helped with that is having mature people around me to explain why people were bullying me and to kind of rationalize it and help me through it and show me that it wasn't a me problem, but it was kind of their problem. Something about me that it's more of a personality thing than anything. I'm willing to like answer people's questions. They come up to me with a trans question. I want to answer it in good faith. And that's me and like my willingness to be open about that sort of thing. Don't ever just go to a trans person and start like asking them a million questions. Like, that's just weird. And just because I was the guy willing to like answer people's questions, I was the guy, like someone random comes up to me and they're asking like, what's it like doing this or that as a trans person? I would be the person okay to answer that, honestly, just because I like having conversation. I like bouncing back. I like helping people understand where I'm coming from. That's sort of just what I like doing. But not every trans person is like that. And not every trans person feels safe or comfortable enough to talk about those things. And so just as a general rule, if you're cis, please refrain from asking a million weird questions to trans people. My ability and willingness to be open about my identity and my experience and to answer questions for people actually did do some favors for me. I think people saw me as this open guy, no secrets, and like just open book. Now, that comes with its drawbacks, of course, which I won't really go into in this video, honestly. But I saw a lot of people grow respect for me. And I don't think you should need to talk about your trans experience for people to respect it. This is just what happened. Now, I don't know what those people were thinking in their heads, obviously. I think that they saw a trans person willing to answer questions, answering questions in detail. And I think it just proved to them that I knew what I was talking about. I knew what I was doing. And I had enough self-respect to not care about what their thoughts on it were. I let them talk and ask questions, but I didn't let them like infiltrate my mind or sway what I said. I was always very nice and respectful, or at least I tried to be when I answered questions, even if the questions themselves were not like nice or respectful. And I was able to do this a lot more with classmates because I truly believe they weren't trying to be like nasty. I think they literally were just trying to ask questions and didn't know how to ask them in an appropriate way. And on a personal level, answering those questions and having those conversations has helped me a lot. It's helped me figure out how to talk to people, how to get people to be on my side more. That sounds manipulative, but it really isn't. There is a certain way that you might want to talk to people who aren't on your side. You want to be respectful, you want to be kind, you want to be sure of yourself. And saying those things aloud to people, it's kind of trained me on how to deal with those types of people more, which is an invaluable skill, in my opinion. But it's also just made me more sure of myself. When you're saying these words out loud with enough confidence and with enough, like, self-assurance, I think you start to believe it more yourself. And so when I was answering these questions about what it's like being trans, when I was, like answering truthfully of who I was and what my experience was, I just grew more comfortable talking about it. I grew more comfortable, just living it, honestly. Aside from my classmates being a little inappropriate in their questioning, I also struggled to deal with the adults. And I actually found that a lot harder to do. At least my classmates were the same age. I knew how to interact with them better. But when you're like 14, 15 talking to an adult about it, they really do take authority over that conversation. And they kind of do automatically have authority just because of their age, which is unfortunate. A lot of the rhetoric I got told from adults was mostly that they felt bad for me and that it was a parenting mistake from my parents, and although it wasn't my fault, I would come to regret this. And that's a really hard thing to hear, especially when my parents were really trying their best. They had tried to provide a really good life for me. And I didn't believe these people when they said my parents were evil or bad, obviously. But it does do something, I think, to put that seed of doubt in a kid's mind. Just that the people they find the most safe could be putting them in the most harm, and also kind of taking the autonomy away from my decision. Like, getting on testosterone, I want to be clear, like, my parents were supportive, but they were following me because they weren't going to put me on testosterone if I didn't want it, if I didn't feel like I needed it for my mental health. And so when people would say, oh, it's like my parents' fault, to me, they were just saying it's my fault because I felt like I was making those decisions for myself. And my parents were supportive of me and they were willing to go to bat for me. But it wasn't their decision to make, like, to be clear. And then the third thing I struggle with, which I think is the thing I struggle with most today, because I've kind of gotten over the classmate thing. I've kind of gotten over the adults. Like, those things happened. They were upsetting at the time in some scenarios. But, like, I get it. The hardest thing for me is coming across anything online focused around the trans children and accessing gender care as a child. I had that experience, and people talk about it. They're talking about me and my experience and other people who've gone through something similar or who want to pursue something similar. And I can just tell that they're speaking on something they know very, very little about. And so the thing that gets me the most mad right now is just hearing all of these arguments being made for people who have already done this, who want to do this, who didn't get the option to but are transitioning later or taking different avenues. I don't know. It's very frustrating. I was a 14-year-old in that position, and it's been 5+ years, and I haven't regretted a single thing. Now that I'm an adult, things with the gender clinic go a little bit easier just because I can sign things off on my own, and I'm allowed to take higher doses of testosterone and stuff now. It's just that these arguments online are just, like, they come from nowhere is the problem. We never hear stories from, like, actual kids who went to a gender clinic who tried or, like, successfully accessed gender care. It's all about speculation and like what we think is going to happen. And unfortunately, that's just kind of the way it is in trans healthcare in general. We don't have enough trans people who are medically transitioning to have a statistically significant amount of data to pull from. Hi, I'm quickly jumping in here to clarify one of my points here. I think it's important that the average Joe Schmo not just butt into any trans topic, because they're speaking from an uninformed place of opinion. It's like if I went to average Joe Schmo at 8 years old asking how to treat my arthritis. I'm not going to listen to Joe Schmo from the street talking about which medications to use for my arthritis, which doctors to see. I don't trust their opinion. And there's a reason we don't trust opinions like that. We need to come from a place of medical information, scientific data that we have, which admittedly is a little limited. But if your only qualification for speaking on this is that you are a parent, or you know a kid, or you know a trans person, or you've heard of a trans argument, I'm sorry, but that's just not enough to go on. And your opinion has very little weight. One of the things I actually really would have liked in my transition, which I knew wasn't possible, but I would have liked to see data on other trans kids and what testosterone or other hormone replacement therapy did to their body or to their mind, positive and negative. Just having that data accessible, it doesn't mean it's going to change your opinion, but having the data accessible and the information to read and look over yourself is very important. We just don't have enough trans people to collect data from, and so we don't have that information. We don't have every detail of what HRT does to a body, and we can't really know that until we have a big enough population to sample from. Which I don't think is going to happen anytime soon. There aren't many trans kids transitioning. But this problem can be seen throughout like the entire medical field. This is not unique. Let's say you're a person of color, like automatically there's a lot less data on what medications or what treatment does on like a person of color. And this just comes from me believing that every patient should be well informed. They know what meds they're putting in their body and what they could potentially do. We don't have enough data anywhere, like in any scientific field, for any of these things. A lot of medications that I've trialed, not related to the trans stuff, have just like messed with my body a bunch, and we don't even have enough data on that. It's just good to have studies on how different treatments affect you, just to be an informed patient, to know what you're getting yourself into. Like I said, this doesn't necessarily change the treatment options or like the route you're going to take in treatment for anything, not just trans related. It just makes you a more informed person. It gives you things to look out for, and it can help you bring up concerns with your doctor. But since we kind of have to speculate on a lot of trans issues, especially, people really love to speculate on the kids stuff. And I'm just kind of here to be like the one thing you can't speculate on right now. I was a trans kid. I don't regret it. There's no speculation on that. And so if you need just one person's word that it worked, here it is. And I know my word doesn't like speak for a lot. It doesn't speak for nearly every trans person, but it's a success story. And I think that counts for something. But despite all of the hate and like, especially the arguments around like accessing gender care as a kid these days, despite all of that and all that I went through, I really don't think about my gender that much. It's honestly a little cathartic to know that some cis people are stewing over my gender more than I am. I feel good. I feel like a normal guy. I feel like at 20 years old, even if my puberty didn't hit exactly like all the other cis guys, I feel like as close to a cis guy as I could have asked for. Most people see me as the gender I am. Most people respect me. And most people respect what I have to say about my transition, because it's my story. I am beyond grateful I transitioned early. It set me up for success. And I don't know where I would be right now if I had to wait until I was 18. There is a real possibility I wouldn't be here sitting in this chair today if I didn't get the testosterone 5 years ago. I am happy and comfortable in my gender. Maybe I'm not always happy about where I am in life. I'm not always happy about society. I'm not always happy about being a trans person in society. Especially these days, it's very scary. But I don't regret my transition. I am so happy I did it. So happy. I feel so confident in myself. I feel a lot less insecure. I feel like I'm ready to become more than my gender. I wasn't ready to be more than my gender at 14. I was so hyperfixated on it. I was worried about it all the time. And now it's just such a small piece of who I am. And that's what I wanted. The treatment for my gender dysphoria is working. Should every trans kid go on hormones? No. Not every trans kid should go on hormones. Not every trans person, period, needs hormones or wants hormones. Some people just go for surgery. Some people just do hormones. Some people just do period blockers. Whatever it might be, not every transition has to look the same. I'm tired of cis people kind of amounting all trans men to the same 3 surgeries. Same thing goes for trans women as well. I don't have as much experience with that. Shout out to all the trans women out there. But should every trans kid have the ability to access like a gender clinic? I think so. Why not? Listen, not everything about the gender clinic is just getting on meds. I spent a year in the gender clinic before I started a med. Like, a lot of it is just therapy. A lot of it is talking through your problems, talking about why you feel bad. It's a lot of bringing up just mental health issues and trying to make sure kids don't kill themselves. And that's a noble cause. Trans healthcare is just healthcare. I'm going to pull up a little example here just to kind of give a very simple comparison. Let's say there is a kid who is suicidal. Maybe just getting bullied a lot and it's stemming from that, or like we could say there was some trauma, whatever. This person is suicidal, this kid. If the parent refused to get that child the mental health care they needed, that would be considered neglect. That would be a reason to call CPS on that family. When we're talking about trans kids who are undergoing so much psychological distress that they often also feel the need to off themselves, I also think it's negligent to not try to find the care they need. And that care would be the gender clinic. So if there's anything to take from this video, I had a positive, life-changing, transformative experience going into the gender clinic at such a young age. I came out a better person. I came out with more confidence. I came out less insecure. I came out feeling like myself. I came out prepared for the world. I feel like a normal guy. I feel comfortable in myself. I don't feel so dysphoric anymore. I don't feel the need to off myself because of my gender. The gender clinic is not a simple, you get in and you get testosterone the first day. There's a lot more involved, and it's a holistic treatment, including a lot of therapy and mental health work. And if you're still a person who thinks that a child should not have access to a gender clinic, I don't know what to tell you. Because the gender clinic is not giving away testosterone like candy. They're spending a lot of time and effort with these people before they go on anything, if they go on anything. And denying them just access to get into the clinic to talk about whatever, because most of the time it doesn't mean hormones. It's just denying them like basic healthcare, denying them mental health care that they could really benefit from. There is no one-size-fits-all trans experience. There is no right or wrong way to approach this. Whether you're a child or an adult, it's all case-by-case basis. Like, now here's where I'm going to kind of retrospectively look at my entire transition. And this is kind of more talking about the physical changes, talking about things that I liked. I want to share some joy, positivity. First things first, since I brought it up in the beginning, my voice. Not everyone likes my voice. And my voice isn't as deep as some like cis dudes or even like other trans men. I'm not upset with that because honestly, my voice was like super, super high to begin with. Like this is like super deep compared to what it was before. And I'm happy with that. Also, another thing that not every trans person gets, but something that I got like crazy just in the past year, was body fat redistribution. This does typically take place like years down the line after you've been on testosterone for a while, but mine was crazy. Like I almost have no chest, like it's very hideable, like, and then like a lot of any fat that I have remaining went to my gut. I feel like my legs and arms are just shaped differently. I'm very happy with it. I'm obviously starting to get some facial hair that just started recently coming in. I'm a slow hair growth. All of my hair starts to come in very, very slowly. It is filling in, and like it's been consistently filling in, but it's just taking a long ass time. Bottom growth was also something that I didn't notice while it was happening because it happened so slowly. But looking back at it now, I'm like, damn, like that thing grew. Hormonal changes are honestly the craziest to me. I didn't really feel the testosterone hormonal thing to start off with. I think that's partially to be attributed to like how slowly I started it. But especially more recently, like in the past couple of years, I have noticed mood fluctuations, like hormonal mood fluctuations every week when I take my injection of testosterone. I do feel a lot more angry about things. Honestly, not completely in a bad way. There are some trans men who get like serious roid rage from the testosterone. Mine was never quite that bad. I've never had like violent outbursts or anything. I've been really angry and like I felt a lot of rage inside. But I also just know how to cope with those emotions. I know how to deal with them. And so they haven't really been a big issue. I've actually appreciated some of the anger I've had because it feels like some of the anger I should have been feeling a long time ago just coming to the surface now and really expressing itself. I think a lot of trans people have a lot to be angry about to begin with, and so the testosterone just kind of fueled that. Also, like major like changes in my sexual drive, especially as of like more recent. I would say in the past like a little over a year, my sex drive has been like crazy. And also, I attribute that to just being more confident in my skin, being willing to be sexual because I feel like the gender I am. Like, I feel confident in myself. I've been trying to rack my brain for things that I might consider to be, like, negative or, like, maybe there's some more nuance to it. And honestly, I think the worst of the transition medically is just the hormone fluctuations. And this only occurs, like, every so often when I was increasing my dose or, like, decreasing it for whatever reason. The fluctuations could be a little dramatic and a little scary and just a lot to go through. I think that's to be said with any puberty, though. It's just you're dealing with a different type of like emotional state. I feel like a lot of trans men that I've talked to, they just feel a lot more anger instead of like other really emotional states they might have been in before. And other than that, I don't think I can think of anything else that has been bothersome to me. I know a lot of trans men have like an increased appetite and thus some weight gain. That wasn't really an issue for me. I did have a serious like weight gain. I gained a lot of weight. I was like in a bad spot. Anyway, that was from a different medication I was on entirely. That was for something completely different. It increases your likelihood of gaining weight. And so I gained a lot of weight, but I can't attribute that to testosterone. Oh, and I forgot the best change of all. The best change of all is just how physically strong I feel. Testosterone has made my muscles insane, but it's really not about the aesthetics of having muscle. It's about feeling strong, feeling capable, feeling powerful. That has been transformative to me. And alongside my medical transition, I did start to do some weightlifting. I got into that probably in like 2020. I got into weightlifting, and it wasn't like consistent. I would take breaks here and there. I haven't done weightlifting in a little bit. That's for different reasons. But doing that, feeling myself become stronger, seeing my muscles grow bigger, in part thanks to the testosterone, in part because of my working out, I just feel more capable. I feel stronger, and there's something to be said about just feeling more powerful. And it might be an overlooked feeling, but I honestly think it's one of the most positive things to come out of taking testosterone. Medically transitioning, alleviating the dysphoria has opened up space in my brain to tackle bigger things. I don't want my trans identity to be the biggest thing in my life, and it really isn't at this point. And now I feel like I can work on other areas of my life. I can become a more successful person. Now that I have this one piece taken care of, there's less weighing me down. So I hope that you gather from this video, I had a good experience. I had a positive experience. I think it was incredibly helpful and instrumental in my life. Maybe you still think trans kids shouldn't transition at all. Whatever your thoughts are, this was my story. And this is why medically transitioning was good for me. That doesn't mean it's good for everyone else, but it was good for me, and it worked. Thank you so much for watching. I know I've probably missed like a million things I could have talked about in this video because, again, this was like 5+ years of my life. But I hope this gives an overview. I hope it was at least a little positive to hear about someone's experience going well, especially as a kid in the gender clinic. I really hope you liked the video. If you did, could you leave it a like? That would help me out so much. I appreciate you so much for watching. I'm not sure how long I've been recording for. This video is probably really long. So thank you for taking some time out of your day to listen to me, and thank you for letting me share my story. Leave a comment. I really want to have a productive discussion. If you have your own thoughts to add, I'm really interested. But, you know, if you're just gonna come here to drop like one of those like basic ass comments that's just like, you're still a girl, like, I'm just bored of it. Could you come up with something else? If you particularly liked anything I had to say, or you just enjoyed listening to me, I would really appreciate it if you subscribed. And I will hopefully see you in the next one.